So the plan is really to split this into 3 different demos. The first one introduces you into exactly how you can use these little building blocks, how you build that. So we will first talk about how can I write the action, how can I create the action and register it with Whisk, how can I invoke it, how can I see which actions are there, how can I delete them again, and stuff like that. In the second part, we will go with a little bit more complex, not really complicated, but a little bit more complex, action where we parameterize them so that I can show you how we can hand over parameters using the payload. Then we will do the cool thing that I've already talked about at the beginning. We will do the chaining, so we'll take multiple actions and put them together. And then we will define triggers, which are these little things that I've talked about that are emitted by service providers, for example. And then, because the trigger does not make much sense if there's no rule that causes the trigger to call action, we will also define a little rule. So first part, we talk about actions. And the first thing that we do here is we write a very simple action. It could be easier. It's implemented in JavaScript. Of course, I could also have picked Swift. And we store it in a file that is called hello.js. So I'm here marking, I use my script here, and I'm marking the text that should make up the action. And as you see, it's a JavaScript function, and this little JavaScript function is returning the text hello world. So I store it in a file called hello.js, and I think the code is not so complicated. And now we need to register the action, which is actually uploading it to the Whisk backend. And to do so, I do a Whisk action create hello.js, which means create the action, call the action hello, and associate it to the file hello.js, which exactly contains the complicated code that we have written before. And as you see, you get a feedback like, okay, the action was created, that's pretty neat. So maybe we don't trust the system, so better look if it has really been created. So what we can do is we do a Whisk action list just to see what actions are there. And we see, yep, there's the hello action that we have just created. It's in my namespace, so this is the little prefix that you see before, but it's all fine. So the next thing we would like to do is we invoke the action to see if it really responds with hello world. And the little blocking parameter means execute it asynchronously so that I directly get a feedback back here. So I do Whisk action invoke blocking hello because hello is the name of the action that we have just defined. And not so surprising, we get as a result hello world. So fine, so far so good. What you also see is that we have an activation ID, which we can use later on if you want to check the result again. So for example, if we have forgotten an activation ID, what we also can do, we can just check for the most recent activation IDs. They are assorted so that you get the most recent activation at the very top. So let's just do that and let's see what activation we already had. And yep, we have activated, so I did something before probably. We have executed the hello action, and you have seen that the activation IDs have matched to each other. And now we can use the activation ID to get the result of the most recent activation, which is of course the one that you have just seen. So the result should be hello world again. So let's see if that really happens. If not, I have to leave. But yes, of course it does. So just to, wait a second. Just to clean up what we did, we can do a Whisk action delete hello, which deletes the hello action that we've created at the beginning. Let's just do that. And as a feedback, we should get the confirmation that it has been deleted. And in case we don't trust the system, we can do a Whisk list to see if there are any artifacts remaining. Yeah, no actions anymore, so it has been deleted. So let's do it a little bit more complicated, still not too complicated. Let's work with parameters. I mean, invoking actions that cannot accept any parameters doesn't make much sense. So let's go with a little bit more complicated code, and this is the one I'm marking now, and let's replace the code that we have written before with this one. And you see that there's one argument coming in called message, and this time we will return hello, name from place, and name and place are the parameters that we hand over during invocation. So what we do is we create the action again. It's again named hello. We let it point to the hello.js file that we have just written. So let's do a clear that you can follow me better. So whisk action create hello hello.js. You already learned what this means. And the action has just been created. So now let's invoke it, and this time we have to hand over the parameters, of course. One parameter is the place parameter, one parameter is the name parameter. And this time I hand over Andreas and Las Vegas, Nevada. So let's invoke it. Takes a moment. And the result is just as expected, hello Andreas from Las Vegas, Nevada. What you can also do is you can define for each action what I would call default parameters by doing parameter binding, so that these are parameters that you do not need to hand over, because if you do not need to hand over them, the default applies. So what we do here is we create the action hello bind params, use the same code again, but this time we say the place parameter per default is Las Vegas. So if someone is invoking this with the name parameter only, the place should fall back to Las Vegas because this has been defined as the default. So let's invoke it, and I really only hand over Andreas as the name parameter. I do not hand over a place parameter, but nevertheless I expect that I get a response like hello Andreas from Las Vegas, Nevada. Not surprising, this really happened. So let's do a little bit more complicated things, and let's do chaining. So really combining multiple actions so that they are being sequentially executed. So let's first check what is available out of the box in Whisk. And what we see here, there are plenty of packages that we could use, and one package was called Whisk System Util. So now we need to find out, it's a little bit too quick, let me stop. So now we need to find out what exactly this Whisk System Util provides us with. We can do that by asking for that and by saying Whisk package get summary to get just a short output, Whisk System Util, and let's see what's in there. And what we see here is there are two actions that we could invoke. One is called sort and one is called cat. I mean, there are more, but we're only interested in them. And one is sorting an array, and the other one is just transforming lines of text into a JSON array. So what we do now here, maybe a little bit slower because it's a little bit more complicated, we again create an action, and it's called my action. And we create it as a sequence to chain these two actions that we now want to use together. It's a little bit like Linux piping. For those that like Linux, they might directly understand that. So if we invoke this action, we will first do the cat and we will then do the sort. So let's see if we can do something fancy with that. So we create a little file. So we first create the sequence, of course, and it has been created, so we already get used to that, I hope. And now we need a little text that is comprised of 3 lines. We store it in a file that is called myhaiku.txt. Let's just do that quickly. And then we take this action and we use this here as a payload. And what we would expect, of course, is that these 3 lines are then being sorted. So let's see if that works. Takes a moment. Yep, it is sorted. So this was chaining, a very powerful concept. And just as I've told you at the very beginning, the reason why it is so powerful is it allows you to stitch together your building blocks in a decorative fashion without the need to touch code. If you look at comparable solutions, you always or often have to touch code to bind one action to the next one. If you can do it declaratively, you can much quicker change the order of these things, add an additional step, remove a step. That's much, much more powerful, of course. So that was all about chaining. Let's do something else. So the second big building block that I've introduced you at the beginning is triggers. The little thing that is being fired and that is then being associated to an action when you use a rule, so that this action is being executed in response to this trigger. So let's do something simple first. We just create a little trigger. And we call the trigger location update, and let's assume it's just a trigger that you would fire if you have changed your geo position. So we create this little trigger here, and it has been created successfully. And of course, we verify again that it has really been created, just as we did with the actions. And now we fire it, so it's there. That's fine. And now we fire it manually. Of course, based on what I've explained at the beginning of this talk, the firing could also become from a service, which is the more interesting case, of course. This is just to demonstrate you how a trigger can be fired. In the next demo, I will show you that this firing can also come from a service like Cloudant. But to get a deeper understanding, let's stick to something simple first. So I fire this one here, hand over some parameters, and let's see what happens. So the feedback I get, it has been fired. I mean, this is not very interesting because there was no action that has been executed. We need some means now to combine this little trigger with the action, and that's exactly what rules are for. So next step, let's define a rule. And the rule we are defining has 3 arguments here, actually. So we create a rule, we call the rule my rule, and we associate the location update trigger that you have seen before with the hello action that we have created before. It's still the hello action that is taking 2 parameters, name and place. So let's create a rule to bring these 2 pieces together. So the rule has been created. It just needs to be activated. And what we now do, we fire the trigger again. But this time it is different. It's not the case that nothing is happening because now we have this rule. So when the trigger fires, the action is being invoked. The parameters that we use here are being handed over to the action so that we should get the feedback that we expect. So in this case, the name is Andreas via trigger so that you can distinguish the difference to the thing before. And the place is still Las Vegas. So let's fire it. And after we fire it, we will ask for the activation IDs, and we will use the topmost activation, which is the last activation that happened because of what I explained to you. They are sorted. The topmost is the recent one. And we will check what the result is. So let's do whisk activation list. Here are all the activations. Let's pick the topmost. And let's say whisk activation result to get the result of the most recent activation, which should then be hello Andreas via trigger from Las Vegas because of what I've just explained. Yep, and it just worked. What you can also do is you can go to the dashboard to get a visual representation of the things that have happened in the past. And what you see here is the activity log, which shows you all the recent activations, exactly the activations that you have seen throughout the last 8 minutes when I went you to the CLI tutorial to make you good Whisk coders for the future. So at the very top, we have the hello Andreas via trigger activation. You also get some additional information. You have an activity histogram where you see which activation has been invoked, how often, what the average execution time was, what the error rate was, and the number of invocations in total. So the dashboard is something that is very helpful to do some kind of initial analysis. So now you have learned about what Whisk is, what the values are, what it makes so different, what it makes it so unique, what the main building blocks are, and how the programming model works, that there are things like actions, how you can create actions, that there are things like triggers, how you can create triggers, and how you can combine triggers and actions together to do something reasonable. Let's do something a little bit more fancy. So I have a second demo for this. And this time what I would like to do, I would like to post something to Slag using an action, and then afterwards I would like to post something to Slag if some change happened on a GitHub repository. So the first step that we are following here is we again ask what packages are available out of the box in Whisk. And the 2 packages that are of interest now, because I want to work with Slag and with Git, is the package Slag and GitHub. Not very surprising. So what we want to do now first is we want to use the Slag package. So we bind to the Slag package and we hand over some mandatory parameters. We tell about the channel, we tell about the username, and we tell about the webhook URL that allows us to post to Slag. So we just create this little binding. And by the way, the data that you are seeing here, I've prepared it before, so I've created a Slack channel and I've copied the URLs and stuff like that. I didn't want to show that. And now we can check what actions are available for that package so that I can really post to the Slack channel. So let's check what actions are available in this out-of-the-box package that we provide you with. And what we see is that there's one single action that is called post, and this is the action that we would like to invoke to post a message to Slack. So let's do it. Let's do a Whisk action invoke and use my Slack channel to post something to using this particular action. So I do this and I quickly open Slack and there should something happen. And it really, oops, yeah, sorry for the play button in between, but it was really saying hello Whisk. So now the next thing that we would like to do is a little bit more fancy. We would not manually invoke this action so that it posts to Slack. We would like that a post happens on Slack if something happens on a GitHub repository, and you know what comes now. Now we need really a trigger and stuff like that. So there was this GitHub package, and to know what this GitHub package provides us with, we just do the same that we did before, and this time we see that there is a feed, and the feed creates a webhook on GitHub so that we can be notified about changes that appear or happen on the GitHub repository. So let's use this package again. We provide some username information and some access token and the repository that we would like to observe. Paste it in here. Just the same procedure that we did before. So trigger has been created. Trigger will now be created. And this trigger will be fired as soon as the change is happening on the GitHub repository. So you should get the pattern that I'm following here. And now I need an action, of course, and the action is a very simple one. So when the trigger fires, it gets information from what has happened on GitHub, and we take that information and use the action to then do the post to Slack, that just as you have seen it before. So let's create the action, and I do not show you the code at this point. You have seen how code looks like, action code looks like before. So I just create a little action, and now just the same procedure again. I have to bring these two pieces together. So I have to create a rule and say, this rule is named get2Slack rule. When the my git trigger fires, and it fires if something changes on the GitHub repository, then please execute the get2Slack action, which does then post the information that it extracted from the information it got from the change to the Slack channel that you have seen before. So now I'm going to my GitHub repository and I do some stupid change here. 1, 2, 3, commit the change, quickly open the Slack, and what you see here now is, after a few seconds, yep, there it is. So this is how it works. One final example, and then we have some time for questions, I guess. To do something really, really fancy. So at the very beginning, I've been talking about Dave. And Dave wanted to build this little mobile applications for the reason that I've given. He wanted to build an iOS application that allows to upload pictures, and these pictures are then being uploaded to a Cloudant database. If they arrive at a Cloudant database, a trigger is being fired by Cloudant. And this causes then a sequence of actions to be executed, where the first action is doing the sharpening, where the second action is doing semantic analysis, where the next action is doing a kind of transformation, because we do not like the way Watson sends us text back. And then we also do a noise reduction, where we use a Docker container that is being executed. Let me first show you this little iOS application that Dave wanted to build, just as I've described it at the beginning of my talk. So this is the little iOS application here. So I have some pictures in here. And this time I just take the picture of the Eiffel Tower. And what is happening now, after I've clicked this little picture, It is being uploaded to the cloud and database. The trigger fires. The sequence of actions that I've just described is being executed. So this picture is now really manipulated the way I've explained it at the very beginning. And one thing that you see immediately here is that the semantic analysis action is being executed, where we use the Watson technology to analyze what this picture is about. And so for the Eiffel Tower, it recognized, okay, this is the Eiffel Tower, it's a landmark, it's blue for whatever reason, maybe there's the heaven. And so it just worked. And at the end of this talk, I would like to show you, and you should, now that you've learned all the main concepts, I would like to show you how you would build that. So the first thing you would do is you would create a trigger, and we call it, in this case, we call it the myCloud trigger, and we use a package that is available out of the box, just as the GitHub package was available, just as the Slag package was available. And we say we want to use this trigger so that it fires as soon as a new photo is being uploaded in the cloud and database, as soon as we have a kind of change there. And then we create all the 4 single actions that we need. So we have this little action for the full analysis. This is doing the semantic analysis, so it's calling the Watson service, and it's actually also calling the Alchemy service. Then we do this transformation thing, which is written in Swift to reuse existing skills, just as I've told you at the beginning. Then we have this full sharpening file, which is written in Node.js, and we have this little noise reduction functionality, which was actually a download from Docker Hub, because there already was an image that we could execute. So very neat. We had not to invest very much effort here. So we wrote these little actions, and this here, for example, is the full analysis action, and you see that there's some code that reaches out to Watson, a service of our ecosystem, to do the semantic analysis. There's also some code to do the sharpening. There's some Swift code for doing the change for the text that we get back from Watson. So it is very simple. I've put everything in lowercase, and we replace the different delimiters that are sometimes used, like plus, minus, and so forth, with one single character. And then we have this little Docker file here that is being executed as well. So we create these 4 actions by executing these 4 commands, and then we create a chain, the sequence, just the way I've explained it before when we sorted that little text. And the sequence says, okay, if this action is being executed, then please do first the analysis, then do the transformation to get the text in the right format, then do the sharpening, and then do the noise reduction. And at the end, we just create a rule that says, it is named myRule. When the myCloud trigger fires, which means when the photo arrives on the cloud and database, then please execute this action, which means call all these actions in this sequence.